بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي خلق الكون فنظمه وخلق الإنسان وكرمه وسن الدين وعظمه ووضع البيت وحرمه، ثم الصلاة والسلام وأفضل التحية والإكرام على نبينا وحبيبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Praise be to Allah, who created the world and gave it order, created humans and gave them dignity, commanded faith and dignified it, established the house and protected it. We greet and salute the most noble of all prophets, our Prophet, Prophet Muhammad. May peace of Allah be upon him and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our 10th night, the 10th program during this blessed month of Ramadan. I sincerely ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everyone's safety and well-being during these difficult and pressing time. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. In the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the people of the elephant? Didn't he foil their treacherous plan and sent down against them swarms of birds, pelting them with claystone and making them like straw that has been eaten away? I'm sure if we were to follow the pattern and step by step, we should be addressing Quraysh. But since the chapter on Fil and Quraysh have similar central theme, I intend, inshallah, with the help of Allah, to address both of them tonight. Because Fil and Quraysh have similar theme, and even the jurists are debating whether in the prayer, in the Wajib prayer, one could read both Surah Al-Fil and Surah Al-Quraysh after Surah Al-Hamd. You can refer to your own grand scholar to find out his opinion regarding this issue. But before we discuss these two critical chapters, I want to focus just briefly on a recap. Last night, two major issues that we dealt with. One was the issue of tafsir and ta'wil, by first discussing Al-Imran verse number 7, and looking at how that particular verse stipulated, particularly, and draw the attention to the various, that these Quranic verses have muhkamat and mutashabihat, clear and ambiguous. However we define it, we address it there. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reserves the right and to mutashabihat, the understanding of mutashabihat, to himself, and only select of individuals that they may possess, and Allah may grant them that knowledge. And we also looked at how Ahlul Bayt maintained always that they were the one, apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they have been granted such a privilege and such a knowledge, and nobody else. So occasionally when we hear of tafsir and ta'wil, feminist tafsir or liberal ta'wil, and they claim using Al Imran 7 that there are verses of mutashabahat and muhkamat, and this is their somehow ta'wil and understanding of the verse, one has to question the motive. As the verse Al Imran says, there are those who try to make discord and disunity or cause problem by focusing purely on mutashabihat rather than muhkamat. I also gave an example of Marhum Tabatabai and the rationale that he said should be used, in which Quran, Al Imran 7 clearly states that there is a synchronization and synthesis between the mutashabihat and muhkamat. The muhkamat are supposed to be Ummul Kitab, the mother verses, by which we use to clarify issues that might be ambiguous. And this is tafsir al-Quran bil-Quran. That's the rationale, the logic, that you use one verse and you go through a kind of brainstorming with the Quran. You present and see whether there are other hidden meaning within the Quran that could be explained and stipulated by other verses from the Holy Quran. Another chapter, another issue, another concept that we dealt with was the notion of the Surah Al-Ma'un itself, and how, first of all, what is the understanding of faith? Is it purely just practice, claiming allegiance, verbal allegiance to a particular principle, and then not practicing it properly, or sometimes even practicing it, but not paying attention to the in-depth understanding of the faith? And how, even according to Surah Al-Ma'un, prayers could become meaningless when they lack belief in the hereafter, and how the absence of the belief in the hereafter could lead to hardening of the heart and callousness, to the point that a person wealthy but yet has no compassion and mercy for those, the poor, the needy, the orphans, and less fortunate. That Abu Sufyan was a classic example. This is why last night, as I was trying to explain, I said Sha'n al-Nuzul about Abu Sufyan is academic. It's nothing really important. It's neither here nor there. What Quran is trying to remind us, to encourage us, is to ask this critical and central question. What kind of a person, having wealth, can become so callous that has no regard for the orphan, for the needy, and the destitute from their own society? And then step back and see, reflect on ourselves. Tonight, inshallah, I'm going to focus on Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, starting from chapter 101, Surah Al-Qari'ah, until Humaza 104, pays huge attention in describing Quraysh, and points out to them that they have remained so possessed with love of wealth and children that they have grossly failed to fulfill their duty towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to their fellow human being. We briefly touched upon this last night as we were clarifying what faith might be. In these two chapters, Fil and Quraysh, they are cautioned, Quraysh are cautioned that they have been blessed by peace, with peace and sustenance, not because of their own effort, but because they were in, or they because they were entitled of it, but because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fulfilling the invocation that Prophet Ibrahim made and the prayer that asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this house and to look after it, granted with mercy. وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا بلدا آمنا وارزق أهله من الثمرات. O Lord, make this house, the house that he and his son, Prophet Ismail, they have made, make it secure and grant them, give them all the fruit and the sustenance that they need. So in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to remind Quraysh in particular, and people of Mecca in general, and other Arabs around, that if they have sustenance, if they have security, it's not because they deserve it, far from it. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fulfilling that prayer and the invocation that Prophet Ibrahim has made. This is why, after explaining this, Allah chastises and criticizes Quraysh for not standing up to their part and their share of responsibility. Instead of showing vanity, they are obligated to worship the Lord of the house who fed them in hunger and secured them against every kind of danger. One of them is Surah Al-Fil that we are going to, and then you see the relationship between Surah Al-Fil and Surah Quraysh, that at the end of Surah Quraysh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala somehow concludes, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. So secured them from all the fear and the danger, and at the same time fed them, sustained their life. But before we start with Surah Al-Fil, we really need to clarify a few things. Surah Al-Fil is a reference to an event that happened precisely between late 570 and early 571 current era. The story of it, I'm going to, inshallah, discuss the background of it. But we really need to address one thing before we get to the story by itself. People of Arabia, unlike, say, the Romans or the Persians that had some kind of civilization, and they had some kind of a history, book of history, that they could record things, people of Arabia did not have historians, or they did not kept record or books of history. What they used was they looked for events, what we call singular event monumental, that had huge effect on their life. And then those events were taken as a reference point. And then they would say, for example, a year before this event or 2 years after. So when they want, and they refer to that event, the one that had a huge effect on their life, until it was preceded with another one. Say when another event that came with huge effect on their life, the older event was ignored, and then they started to use the new event as a reference point, as a mark, somehow that everything else, landmark that everything else was related to it. Two events took place in the history of the Arabian Peninsula around the late 5th century and beginning of the 6th century, 496 current era, and to about 570. Around 496, a battle or a war developed between two parties, Bani Taghlab bin Wa'il and Bani Shayban bin Tha'lab. The war is called Harb al-Wusus. Hardly anyone, unless you have read the history of Arabian Peninsula, we certainly know about Amul Fil, but we normally don't have any clue about Harb al-Wusus. Harb al-Wusus, war between two tribal community on one camel. It's strange when we look back to see for 40 years, unimaginable, that two tribes that somehow they were linked and their ancestors might have been the same. Two tribes go to war with each other for 40 years for a single camel that belonged to a lady from this tribe that accidentally was killed or slaughtered by a member of another tribe. We Christians talk about the 30 years or 50 years or 100 years war, religious war in Europe. This was later on, around, say, late 14th century and beginning of 15th century. The Arabian Peninsula had its own war of the 40 years on one camel. The Christian wars were on the interpretation of the scripture. This one was on one camel between two parties. And finally, when one of the Bani Tha'lab was defeated, the war somehow came to an end. This was the 40 years war or Harb al-Wusus. If you look at some of these reference or historical documents, they refer to this and they say, so-and-so was born 3 years before Harb al-Wusus, or middle of Harb al-Wusus, or 5 years after Harb al-Wusus, underlining the fact that there was no proper historical books to be written. So these monumental events were used as a landmark to somehow fix their life around it. Another event which took place is the story of Fil, that Surah Al-Fil addresses, around 570 to 571. But what is the story of Fil and how did it unpack itself? We really need to go a little bit back in history. The story of Fil begins in Najran. Somehow, strangely enough, Yemen and the Arabian Peninsula, and today we have Yemen and Saudi Arabia, their history had been interconnected. People of Najran that used to be Jewish, the Jewish and Christian community were spread around in pockets in Arabian Peninsula. So where there were fertile lands, you saw Jewish community, or later on, as they converted to Christianity, Christian community established themselves. So the Jews around Medina were the fertile land, and the ultimately Christians in southern Arabia, which is Yemen, and particularly Najran. So Najran, as a community, they are Jewish. Christianity comes to them, and they convert to Christianity. The king of Najran, a person by the name Dhu Nawas, who himself is Jewish, finds out about that the community had already converted to Christianity, and zealous, as most Zionists are, he decided to send an army and literally wipe them out. And hopefully that he will, over time, reestablish Judaism. The news got to Habasha, or the Abyssinian king in Habasha, and to other kings, Christian kings around, that the Christian community in Najran, in the southern Arabian Peninsula, was literally massacred by this king because they had converted to Christianity. They sent an army, they killed the king, and then established some kind of a Christian community over there. Two military leaders, Erbat and Abraha, they ruled this community. Abraha became very zealous with regard to establishing a community. He built a huge cathedral in Sana'a that we hear today, day in, day out, being bombarded by the Saudi Air Force. So in Sana'a, this huge cathedral was built, hoping that people gradually convert to Christianity and move and use this cathedral. The more he waited, the less successful he became. He spent sometimes trying to establish why is it that people are not coming south towards this huge cathedral. Found out that the obstacle is Mecca, and particularly the presence of Kaaba in this city. He tried to negotiate some kind of deal. It didn't work. People would not come down. His PRs did not succeed. So he comes to the conclusion that the city has to be razed to the ground and this house, Kaaba, to be destroyed. He organizes huge army and with a number of elephants, which those days, the idea of using elephant in a battle was totally an anathema, unheard of within the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula. So he moves with this huge army and big, either African elephant or Indian elephant in front to go towards Mecca, and ultimately reaches Mecca with the desire or the wish to destroy Kaaba as the biggest obstacle to turning his cathedral into something of a symbol of Christianity in the south, where people begin to come. They came, and at that particular day that wanted to attack the city, as now we're going to go into the verse, the chapter, swarm of birds came. For us that now living in the post or during coronavirus, where a symbol a symbol virus can literally travel the world and destroy a community, the notion that these birds somehow had something in their beaks that they dropped it on this army, and then within 24 hours they were all destroyed, is more understanding than previously thought of. There is a confrontation that takes place, or at least a debate, between Sayyidina Abdul Muttalib and Abraha. The army of Abraha, they take number 200 camel. He had herds of camel, 200 camels of Abdul Muttalib, and he decides to come to face Abraha directly and asks for his camel. Abraham knew that Abdul Muttalib is the chief of this well-respected, wise individual, and he is the one that literally controls the city. When he was told that Abdul Muttalib is coming to see him, he was under the impression that Abdul Muttalib is going to plead with him, please don't attack the city, etc., etc. So he comes, they sit, and says, okay, how can I help? He says, to be frank, I have 200 of my camels have been taken by your army. Would you ask them to send these back? Abraham is astonished. And he says, to be honest, when you walked into the tent, because of what I have heard about you, I considered you looked like a wise man, and I considered you the caliber that I could negotiate some kind of settlement with. But this question disappoints me. I'm planning to go and attack the city that you are in charge of it, and the house that it's your responsibility, and you're asking me about your camel? Look at the trust that exists in Abdul Muttalib. His response was sharp and to the point. Ana Rabbul Ibil. I am the Lord of the camel. وَلِلْبَيْتِ رَبٌّ هُوَ يَحْمِي. Absolute trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am the Lord of the camels. This house has a Lord, and that Lord will protect it. Doesn't need my protection, and leaves. And then people say, from such a person, Abu Talib is a kafir. Let's go to the surah itself. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألم تر كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل. Now you begin with this little bit of historical background. You begin to understand that Quran in this chapter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't begin by describing the event, just reminding, a simple reminder. Remember that this verse probably was revealed about 40 to 45 years after the event of Fil. The birth of the Holy Prophet was during Am al-Fil. Abu Talib was 35, using the same criteria that Quraysh used. Abu Talib's birth was 35 years before Am al-Fil. So there were a huge number of people that actually were present, still alive. Quran doesn't need to remind them or unpack for them the story, just a gentle or a simple reminder. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka ba'ashab al-fil. Can't you see? Don't you see? Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil wa arsala alayhim tayran ababil tarmihim bihijaratin min sijil faj'alahum ka'asfin ma'kul. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the people of the elephant, refreshing their mind? Didn't he foil their treacherous plan and sent down against them swarms of birds who pelted them with clay stones? Now, what exactly it was, nobody knows. Clay stone could be a number of things. And God made them like straw that has been eaten and chewed away and destroyed. So, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil, within the mindset of the Arabs of Jahiliyyah at the time of revelation, early part of Islam, there were a huge number of people that actually lived and remember that event. Only 40 to 45 years. So the verse is trying to refresh their memory about this monumental event that took place. Just imagine. All the armies, some people say 30, 40, 60, whatever thousand troops, they have come to literally destroy and raze it to the ground, a city that could not find an answer to defend or a way to defend and protect themselves. A monumental event that took place on this holy land, and not something that people could not be familiar with. Only recent history, to them it was a recent history. And this is why Quran reminds them, doesn't give them any detail. Occasionally happens, people who really become self-centered and egocentric. Great miracles happen in their life in front of their eyes, and they survive, and then they want to go back to the old without even blinking. Bani Israel was one of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala parted the Nile. They passed through the Nile. Pharaoh that was coming behind them was drowned and finished. They crossed the Nile. As soon as they get to an idol worshipping community, Ya Musa, ij'al lana ilahan kama lahum alaha. We need an idol to worship. You just saw the biggest miracle in your life. In this Surah Al-Fil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to remind Quraysh that you remember this monumental event that took place in your life. Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil. Didn't you see how they were destroyed? And that treacherous plan was destroyed. Wa arsala alayhim tayran ababil. Send them this swarm of ababil, whatever ababil, just swallows or something else. Or parrots, God knows. Tarmihim bihijaratin min sijil, that dropped these clay stone on them. Faja'alahum ka'asfin ma'kul, totally destroyed. This is the beginning. So in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds Quraysh that if there is security, that they are going to be protected, or they have been protected. It's not because they deserve it. The security and safety comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we go to Surah Quraysh immediately after this, we see similar kind of theme. And then ultimately at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds them that in both surahs, Allah reminds Quraysh that if they are living peacefully and securely, it is because of that divine fulfillment of the promise to Prophet Ibrahim that asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect his house. It is the affiliation with this city that protects them, the sacred house, that and provides them provision and security for them to live and sustenance. And then Quraysh reminds Quraysh that they are required, if this blessing is given to them all the time, not because some kind of merit that they possessed, shouldn't they submit to the command of Allah and worship Allah, the Lord of the house, that they have all the privilege because of their association to the house? And then we move towards Surah Quraysh. لإلاف قريش إلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا. This is the conclusion. In the Surah Fil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds them of how God made them secure and privileged. In this surah, talks about their relationship with journeys during summer and winter, business journeys to Palestine and Syria in the north during summer, and to Yemen in the south. Owing to their association, that's Quraysh, and the association that they have with this house, and the summer journeys and the winter journeys, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks them, they should worship the Lord of this house, who sustained them during hunger and provided them peace and security during fear. لإلاف قريش, because enforces the same thing, the same message. It's because of Quraysh association with it, with the house, because it becomes clear later on. Literally means when Quraysh is used to be a term that Quraysh was used to and familiar with, place. In another word, because of their attachment to the house and association with the house, that this verse is pointing to the benefit that they have received from it. So the Quraysh is reminded that the honor, prestige, and there was a huge prestige for Quraysh and the Arabs after the incident of Fil. The news spread around everywhere, gave some kind of an aura of dignity to Quraysh and in particular, and the Arabs of living in Mecca in general. If there is any honor, prestige that they have attained in Mecca, it's not because something that they deserve, far from it. This peninsula and the prestige that they have gained, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has protected them, made them secure because of the house. What happened to Ashab al-Fil had huge PR effect on people of Mecca and Quraysh, that led to tremendous business opportunities for them. And they literally milked it because they benefited from it, both in two ways. Their journeys during the summer to the north and winter to the south, and then the geographical strategic location of Mecca on the route from north to south that they benefit from. And after the event of Fil and the image that it was created and the prestige that it was created for them, travelers would come to pass through Mecca. So there was a huge benefit for them. It wasn't because of their business acumen, so to speak. It was because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a special attention to the city and to the house that they benefited from. إِلَافِهِمْ رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. This journey, that associated journey that they were attached to during the summer to Syria and Palestine, and during winter to south in Yemen. They not only benefited from participating in trade journeys, they benefited from the caravans that passed through Mecca after the event of Fil, and they benefited from. Now comes the conclusion, the concluding part of the two surah together. Reminding Quraysh in Surah Al-Fil, you still remember the greatest event in your life. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from that monumental danger. And then points to this associated business journeys or caravan routes and benefit that they get from it. Then comes this فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَآمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. This passage bring the two chapters together. They should be grateful to Him and worship Him with all sincerity because of everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done, although they deserve it. And this is a point that we really need to step back and look at ourselves. We are privileged. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done given us huge amount of benefit and mercy. Not because we are entitled to it. It's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most generous, given us so that we become conscious of our responsibility. Bringing the three chapters together, Ma'un with it, and engaging the whole literature, we have been blessed. We have been given at the same time the opportunity so that not only submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we also be responsible and conscious of our responsibility and our duty to the others. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. So these privileges are given to us not for ritual practices, superficial issues that once a month or every other month or whatever we do, or during the month of Ramadan. No, we have absolute belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Abdul Muttalib. Inna lil bayti rabbun huwa yahmi. And at the same time, faith means establishing a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, focusing on our own responsibilities. At the same time, we need to be conscious and mindful of our duties towards others. And on that point, let me conclude. Let my prayer about those who feel conscious of their social responsibilities and they put their lives on the front. May Allah protect them and save them from all that might come to them. And at the same time, during these nights, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant speedy recovery to those who have fallen victim to this debilitating disease. And somehow we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a reprieve, something that we can come out of this crisis and then look back and richer, more informed, and learn something from it. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.